Hey there, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a review of Entangled Life, How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Futures by Merlin Sheldrake. This is the second book picked for the month of May for the Book Naturalists Book Club, and this is the most sciencey of the books that we've chosen to read so far yet this year. All of the books previous to this have been a combination of memoir and nature writing, and this is very much a more straightforward piece of science nonfiction, all about fungi and how they work and what they do for humans and what they do for the world in general and natural environments in general. Lots of fascinating information was presented in this book, and I thought I would start out today in our discussion of this book by reading to you the very first paragraph of the introduction. What is it like to be a fungus? Fungi are everywhere, but they are easy to miss. They are inside you and around you. They sustain you and all that you depend on. As you read these words, fungi are changing the way that life happens, as they have done for more than 1 billion years. They are eating rock, making soil, digesting pollutants, nourishing and killing plants, surviving in space, inducing visions, producing food, making medicines, manipulating animal behavior, and influencing the composition of the Earth's atmosphere. Fungi provide a key to the understanding the planet on which we live and the ways that we think, feel, and behave. Yet they live their lives largely hidden from view, and over 90% of their species remain undocumented. The more we learn about fungi, the less makes sense about them. The less makes sense without them. So I think that's a really good introduction to what this book is about. There is so much fascinating information in this book. This is one of those kind of books that you're going to read and you're going to be running around to people that you interact with saying, did you know that? Did you know that? Did you know that? Did you know that fungi can take over animals and insects and make them behave in like they're zombies? Like there's a species of fungi that basically take over the inside of wasps and make wasps do certain things. And then when they're done with that, they produce a mushroom, which is the fruiting body of fungi, and it goes up through the body of the wasp. There's several species that do that. There's also fungus that gets sent into space and can live outside of the space station in basically deep space where there is no oxygen, where there is radioactive stuff. Like no way that life on Earth should be able to live in deep space without life support, and certain fungi can do that. So I just think that this book is one of those books that really can broaden your mind and change your viewpoint about a whole group of organisms that perhaps you hadn't fully considered before. As I had said in my review of the last book we read for the month of May, which was also about mushrooms, I am not a mushroom lover. I do not like to eat mushrooms, but I am certainly fascinated by fungi and the role that they play in sustaining life on Earth, the role that they play in connecting multiple different species. In other books that I've read about forest ecology, there's been a lot of discussion of what's known as the wood wide web, and that is the fungal network underneath the soil that allows trees to communicate with each other. At least we think that's what's happening. But this book goes into depth more about that and what each of the different species that are interconnected in this way possibly are getting out of that relationship, the ways in which they benefit and the ways in which they are hurt by those connections. So that's really fascinating. There's a whole section in here that discusses the use of psychedelic mushrooms and what we know about that and the impact of psychedelic mushrooms on the human psyche, ways that they've been used through time and history, current research in the area, and things that we're learning about beneficial uses of psychedelic mushrooms. So that was all really fascinating as well. There's a whole section in here about how fungi can be used to produce intoxicating liquids. So that was really interesting as well. I mean, there's just, you can see by how much I've tabbed this book, like how much how many interesting facts I found in this book. And then I just wanted to pull out a few of these really interesting factoids for you so that you might be induced to pick up this book as well. There's a section in here that talks about fungi that produce scents that attract worms and different insects so that the fungi can eat them. So there are predatory and carnivorous fungi that act in a similar way to carnivorous plants, in that they are attracting live creatures and then consuming those creatures once they've been caught. So that was pretty interesting. Something I did not know anything about before I read this book. There was a whole section in here about lichens, which lichens are a really interesting organism, in that they are a fungus that has a symbiotic relationship with algae, and it basically creates a new creature called a lichen, and it's a mixture of a fungi and an algae. And that there is ongoing and new research happening with lichens, and lichens are actually the particular organism that can live outside the space station and be brought back to Earth and continue to live, which is just fascinating to me. But evidently, lichen also can help us shed some light on some really thorny social issues for humans as well. There's a whole section in here that talks about queerness in lichens. Basically, there's a scientist who's written a paper about queer theory for lichens, and this author argues that lichens are queer beings that present ways for humans to think beyond a rigid binary framework. The identity of lichens is a question rather than an answer known in advance. And basically, this scientist is putting forth this idea that because of the way humans think, we have a binary view, and that makes it difficult for us to ask questions about things that we may not know enough about. We only ask questions from our own cultural context, our own perspective, as whatever culture we grew up in. That's where our questions come from. And because of that, it's made us put blinders on. And those blinders are stopping us from seeing things in different ways, in different lights. And I just thought that was such an interesting concept, that by looking at these interesting organisms called lichens, you can actually begin to question human behavior and how humans question the world, and to get a different perspective by looking at the world as a lichen would look at the world. So, and that is basically what Merlin Sheldrake, our author, is asking us to do, is asking us to look at the world from the viewpoint of fungi, and to see how that might change your perspective and change your point of view. Merlin Sheldrake is a biologist, a very young biologist. This is a picture of our author from England, I believe, and he has done research in Panama, and so he's early on in his career, so it'll be interesting to see what else he comes up with. Another aspect of this book that I wanted to point out before I end this review is that fungi are being used to, how do I want to phrase this? Fungi, there is research right now into fungi that can be used to bioremediate pollution. And because fungi can be induced to consume a lot of different things, there are biologists that are working with fungi to see if they can convince or train these fungi to consume pollutants. And they've had some success in doing that. And it's just fascinating. There are particular fungi that live in the Chernobyl nuclear plant. Like, nothing else can live there because of the levels of radioactivity, but these fungi. So yeah, it's just fascinating. There's also building materials that are being created out of fungi, like insulation and roofing materials and packaging materials that are being created using fungi. And that's totally biodegradable. So like, it's not going to create extra waste in our waste stream. It's just fascinating stuff. So the science around fungi is really in super development mode, I would say. There's lots of new information that's being learned all the time, and this is a great window into some of that stuff that is being developed. So I would recommend this book if you are interested in learning more about fungi and you are interested in learning about it through the lens of a scientist. So like I said, I would just give warning that this book is more science focused than the other books we read for the Book Naturalists Book Club. And so if a very factual and science-based narrative is not your jam, just be warned. But I found out a lot of really neat things about fungi by reading this book. And also the cover is beautiful. So that's my review for Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. I hope that you were inspired to pick up some nature books this month and the previous months from the Book Naturalists Book Club. And I look forward to talking with you about our book next month as well. Hope you're all doing well. Talk to you later.